The ground was shaking under the weight of explosions. Ethan Cole lay on his back, staring at the black sky filled with smoke and fire. His ears rang from the last blast, and he could barely move his legs around him. The battlefield was silent, except for the distant echo of weapons. The air smelled of burnt metal and blood. Bodies of humans and aliens lay scattered, some still holding their weapons. Ethan knew the fight was over, and his side had lost. He tried to push himself up, but pain shot through his chest. He coughed, and warm blood filled his mouth. His rifle was lying just a few feet away, but his arm felt like stone. He could see shadows moving in the smoke. Tall alien soldiers with sharp armor stepped over the fallen. Their glowing eyes scanned for threats, ignoring the dying. One of them looked at Ethan for a moment, then turned away. He was no danger anymore. Ethan felt his heartbeat slowing. His vision blurred, and the world became quiet. Then, through the thick smoke, a massive figure appeared. She was not like the other aliens. Her armor was lighter, her movements slower. She was tall, at least 9 feet, with dark silver skin, and eyes like deep blue water. Her long black hair was tied behind her head, and her hands were bare. She looked down at Ethan, her expression unreadable. "You are hurt," she said in deep but gentle English. Ethan tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound. Her gaze softened, and without warning, she knelt beside him. Her large hand touched his chest, feeling his weak heartbeat. "You will not die here," she said, almost to herself. She reached under his body and lifted him with ease. Her arms were strong yet careful, holding him close as if he was fragile. Ethan's head rested against her shoulder. He could feel her warmth even through the pain. He wanted to ask who she was and why she was helping him, but his voice failed. Her long strides carried them away from the battlefield, past burning vehicles and broken walls. Every step took them further from the noise of war. Ethan tried to keep his eyes open. The world swayed with her movements. She did not speak again, but he could feel her eyes glancing down at him from time to time. The smoke began to thin, replaced by the cool scent of wet earth. The sound of explosions faded into the distance. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if this was a dream. A 9-foot alien woman saving a human soldier. It made no sense. They reached a hill covered in strange, glowing plants. The light from them painted her face in soft green and blue. She stepped into a narrow cave hidden between 2 rocks. Inside, the air was warm, and the walls seemed to hum softly. She laid Ethan down on a bed made of thick alien fabric. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at him. Then she began removing a small pouch from her belt. Inside were strange tools and glowing liquid vials. Ethan tried to move, but she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Rest," she said, her voice firm but kind. She cleaned the wound on his chest with a warm cloth. The liquid from the vial stung at first, but then cooled. Her large fingers worked with surprising skill. She wrapped him in soft bandages that smelled faintly of flowers. When she was done, she sat beside him, watching. Ethan's breathing slowed, and the pain faded to a dull ache. "Who are you?" he managed to whisper. She tilted her head as if thinking. "My name is Sira," she said slowly. Her eyes stayed on his face, as if reading his thoughts. "You are safe now." Ethan wanted to believe her, but questions filled his mind. Why would an alien help him, especially when her kind had just destroyed his unit? What did she want from him? Before he could ask, the warmth of the shelter and the exhaustion in his body pulled him into darkness. The last thing he felt before sleep was the faint touch of Sira's hand resting gently on his arm. It was not the touch of an enemy, it was the touch of someone who had decided he was worth saving. Ethan woke to the sound of a soft humming. It was not the noise of machines or gunfire. It was gentle, almost like a lullaby. He opened his eyes slowly. The ceiling above him was not made of stone or metal, it was alive, covered in glowing vines that moved as if breathing. Shadows from the light danced across the walls. The air was warm and smelled faintly sweet. His body felt heavy, but no longer in sharp pain. He moved his arm and realized he was lying on a bed made from thick alien fabric. It was softer than any military cot. Bandages wrapped his chest and shoulder. They were clean and tight, holding the wounds closed. He heard footsteps, heavy yet slow, turning his head. He saw her, the 9-foot alien woman Sira. She was crouched near a low table made from smooth black stone. Her long fingers worked carefully as she crushed glowing leaves into a small bowl. Steam rose as she mixed it with a thick golden liquid. When she noticed he was awake, she stood and walked over. "You are stronger today," she said, her voice calm. Ethan tried to sit up, but she placed a hand on his chest and gently pushed him back. "Not yet," she added. He studied her in the dim light. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer as she moved. The faint scars on her arms told stories of battles she had fought. Her eyes were steady, watching him not with suspicion, but with quiet care. She held out a small cup made of carved crystal. "Drink," she said. The liquid was warm and slightly bitter, but it eased the dryness in his throat. Almost at once, he felt a little more awake. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough. "My home," she replied simply. Ethan glanced around, taking in the strange room. There were shelves carved into the walls, holding jars, weapons, and small objects. Some were clearly alien, but others. His eyes stopped on a metal dog tag hanging from a string. It was human. Before he could ask, Sira spoke. "You are safe here," he frowned. "Safe? But from who?" Her kind had been the ones attacking. Why had she saved him instead of finishing him off? "Why?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't answer right away, instead turning back to the table to mix more herbs. After a long silence, she said, "Because you are not my enemy." Her words only deepened the mystery. Ethan wanted to ask more, but his strength was still weak. Sira handed him a small bowl of thick stew. The meat was strange but tender, the broth rich. He ate slowly, watching her as she moved around the shelter. She was graceful despite her size, each movement measured. When she sat across from him, he noticed her eyes kept studying him, not in the way a soldier studies a threat, but in the way someone studies a puzzle. She asked about his name, his home, and the meaning of the marks on his uniform. Her voice was curious, not demanding. Ethan answered carefully, leaving out details about his unit or location. Still, she listened closely, as if storing every word. When he asked about her, she gave little away. "I live alone," she said, "far from others." There was a weight in her tone, as if the subject was closed. Hours passed in quiet conversation. The shelter seemed to change with the light. The glowing vines dimmed, replaced by the flicker of a small fire pit outside. Strange noises echoed, distant cries of creatures he could not name. Each time a sound grew too close, Sira's head would lift, her eyes sharp. Ethan could see the way her muscles tensed under her skin. She was ready to defend at any moment. As night settled, she brought him more water and checked his bandages. Her hands were large, but she handled the wounds with delicate care. "You will heal," she said, almost to herself. For a moment, Ethan caught something in her eyes, not just kindness, but a deep loneliness. He thought of the human dog tag hanging on the wall and wondered whose it had been. When he finally lay back to rest, Sira sat near the entrance of the shelter, her spear resting across her knees. She kept her gaze fixed on the dark outside. Tall frame lit faintly by the glow of the vines. Ethan watched her until his eyes grew heavy. For the first time since the battle, he did not feel the weight of fear pressing on his chest. He still didn't know why she had saved him, but in that moment, in that strange and alien shelter, he felt something he hadn't expected, a fragile sense of safety. Ethan woke to the sound of light rain falling outside. The air inside the shelter was warm, carrying the scent of the glowing vines. His wounds still ached, but the pain was softer now. He pushed himself to sit, leaning against the wall. Sira was nearby, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sharpening a long blade with slow, steady strokes. Her eyes lifted when she noticed him watching. "You are getting stronger," she said, her deep voice calm. Ethan nodded. "Because of you." She tilted her head slightly, as if surprised by the thanks, but said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a bowl of food on the table. "Eat," she instructed. The food was different today, thin slices of pale fruit that glowed faintly in the dim light. It tasted sweet and fresh, washing away the dryness in his mouth. As he ate, Sira asked him about human soldiers. "How do you fight?" she asked, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. Ethan told her about discipline, about teamwork, and about how humans never gave up. She listened closely, her blade forgotten in her lap. "And why?" she asked after a pause. "Why fight so hard?" He hesitated, thinking about fallen friends and the war that had taken so much. "Because we protect each other," he said finally. Sira's expression softened, and for a moment, she looked away. There was a sadness there, one she didn't explain. As the days passed, Ethan found he could walk short distances around the shelter. Sira always stayed close, watching in case he stumbled. He noticed how she studied him when he moved, her gaze fixed on his posture, his balance, his muscles. At first, he thought it was just caution, but over time, he realized there was something else, a kind of fascination. She asked him to show her human training exercises. Though his body was still weak, he demonstrated simple moves, push-ups, stretches, combat stances. Sira copied them with surprising precision, her huge frame moving in perfect balance. Sometimes their lessons turned into small contests. Ethan would try to hold a stance longer than her. She would grin, a rare, quick expression, and outlast him easily. Even when she won, she would let him feel like he'd achieved something. It was strange, almost playful, and it made the long days less heavy. One evening, as the fire pit crackled, Ethan noticed something hanging high on the wall. It was not alien. It was a human canteen, dented and scratched. He pointed at it. "That's from Earth." Sira froze, her hand tightening on her spear. "It belonged to someone I knew," she said quietly. Ethan waited, but she didn't offer more. The silence between them grew heavy. Later that night, strange howls echoed through the forest outside. Sira stood and moved to the entrance, her muscles tense. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "Hunters," she replied, her tone sharp. "They search for prey." Ethan's heart raced. He had heard those sounds before, during the war. Beasts with jaws strong enough to crush armor. Sira's eyes flicked toward him. "Stay inside," she ordered. The sounds moved away after a while, but Sira stayed at the entrance until the sky began to lighten. When she finally returned to her seat, Ethan noticed her shoulders relax for the first time. "You guard me," he said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I said you are safe here," she reminded him. Over the next few days, Ethan's strength improved. He could walk further, explore more of the shelter. He found that the walls were lined with small carvings, scenes of alien landscapes, battles, and once, a mother holding a small child. When he touched one of the carvings, Sira appeared at his side almost instantly. Her voice was low. "Do not touch that." Ethan pulled his hand back, sensing the weight in her words. She did not explain, and he did not push. Still, he began to understand her in small ways. How she always gave him the better portion of food. How she checked his wounds twice a day without fail. And how she never let her weapons rest too far from reach. Whatever her past was, it had shaped her into someone who carried both strength and caution. One afternoon, while they sat near the fire, Ethan asked, "Will I see my people again?" Sira's eyes stayed on the flames. "If you leave now, you will die." Her tone was not cruel. It was simply the truth. He thought about the war outside, about the soldiers who had fallen beside him. For now, survival meant staying here with her, and so, in the quiet shelter far from the front lines, the bond between them began to grow. It was not trust yet, not fully, but it was more than just survival. There was curiosity, respect, and something else neither of them dared to name. The day started calm. Rain had passed during the night. leaving the air fresh and cool. Ethan sat outside the cave for the first time, his back resting against a smooth boulder. Sira was nearby, crouched low as she checked a row of traps she had set in the undergrowth. The forest was alive with soft sounds, distant calls of strange birds, the hum of insects, the rustle of wind in glowing leaves. For a moment, Ethan felt almost at peace. Then, the peace broke. A deep, low growl rolled through the trees. It was close, far too close. Sira's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. She dropped the small animal she had just taken from the trap and reached for her spear. Her voice was sharp. "Inside now," Ethan obeyed, moving quickly into the shelter. From the entrance, he saw her stand tall, her spear angled toward the shadows between the trees. The growl came again, louder, joined by two more. Shapes moved in the gloom, massive, wolf-like beasts with long spiked tails and glowing red eyes. Their jaws dripped with thick saliva, and each step they took made the ground tremble. Sira did not wait for them to get closer. With a sudden roar, she charged, the ground shaking. Under her massive strides, her spear flashed in the light. Striking the first beast in the chest, it screamed, a horrible sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. The second beast lunged at her side, but she twisted, slamming her elbow into its skull with bone-cracking force. Ethan watched from the cave entrance, his heart pounding. She moved with terrifying speed for someone her size. But the beasts were fast too. They circled her, trying to strike from behind. One tail lashed out, striking her across the ribs, and she stumbled. The third beast rushed in, its jaws snapping inches from her throat. With a snarl, she drove her spear upward through its jaw, the blade bursting from the top of its skull. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct told him to help, but he had no weapon. Still, he looked around the shelter and spotted a jagged piece of alien metal leaning against the wall. Grabbing it, he stepped out into the open. The second beast was coming for her again, its tail whipping. Before it could strike, Ethan swung the metal shard at its face. The blow wasn't strong enough to kill, but it distracted the creature just long enough for Sira to ram her spear through its chest. She glanced at him for a split second, not with anger, but with a strange flash of approval. The first beast, still wounded, made one last desperate attack. Sira met it head-on, catching its throat in one huge hand. With a roar, she slammed it to the ground and drove the spear down, ending it. The forest fell silent except for their heavy breathing. Sira stood over the bodies, her chest rising and falling, not hers, dripping from her weapon. Then Ethan saw it, a long, deep slash across her side, just under the ribs. Blood flowed freely, dark and thick. "You're hurt," he said, moving to her side. She waved him off. "Not bad." But the strain in her voice told him otherwise. They dragged the bodies of the beasts away from the shelter, leaving them at the edge of the forest. By the time they returned, Sira's steps were slower, her shoulders tense. Inside, she sat heavily on the bed while Ethan searched for the healing supplies she had used on him. When he found them, she tried to take them from his hands. "I can do it," she said. "No," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "You saved me. Let me return the favor." He cleaned the wound as best as he could, the alien salve stinging his fingers. Her muscles tensed under his touch, but she didn't pull away. When he wrapped the bandage around her side, their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something there, not just gratitude, but a shared understanding of what they had just faced. "You fought well," she said at last, her voice softer. Ethan gave a small smile. "I learned from the best." For the first time, he saw her lips curve into something close to a smile. It was small, but real. That night, the fire pit burned low. Sira sat by the entrance, her spear across her lap, but her eyes were heavier than usual. Ethan stayed awake too, watching the shadows outside. If more beasts came, he would be ready this time. The shelter felt different now, not just a place to hide, but a place worth defending. And Sira, she was no longer just as mysterious. rescuer. She was his ally, his protector, and maybe something more. The morning after the attack was quiet. A thin mist hung over the forest, making every tree look like a shadow. Ethan woke to find Sira already awake, sitting near the fire pit. Her side was still wrapped in bandages, but she moved without showing pain. She was cleaning her spear, her hands steady. The events of the night before still played in Ethan's mind. The beasts, the blood, the way she had stood between him and death. He sat across from her, feeling the warmth of the fire. "You should rest," he said, her eyes lifted to meet his. "So should you." There was no argument in her tone, just simple truth. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft crackle of the flames. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You could have let me die on that field." Her gaze didn't waver. "I could have," she agreed. "But I didn't." "Why?" he asked again, hoping for more than the short answer she usually gave. Sira was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the fire. "When I saw you there," she said slowly, "I saw someone who would not survive alone, but who still fought to breathe." She paused, her jaw tightening. "I could not walk away." Ethan studied her face, wondering how someone from the enemy's side could feel that way. She seemed to sense his thoughts. "Not all wars are ours to fight," she said, her voice low. "Your war is not my war." After breakfast, they stayed inside. The rain outside turning heavy, Sira began working on repairing a torn piece of her armor. Ethan watched for a while before asking, "What about you? Before all this?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she set the armor aside and leaned back against the wall. "I had a home," she began, "far from here, near the mountains where the sky is clear." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Ethan heard something in her voice, warmth. "I had a child," she said, her words slow, as if testing each one. "A son." Ethan's chest tightened. "What happened?" he asked gently. Her gaze lowered. "The war," she said simply. She didn't explain if it was the same war between humans and her kind or another. "I fought to protect him, but I could not." Her voice broke just slightly before she caught herself. There was silence, the only sound the steady rhythm of the rain. Ethan told her about his own family, a mother who waited back home, a father who had served before him. He spoke about his first days in training, about the friends he had lost. His voice grew quieter when he spoke of the battlefield that had taken his unit. Sira listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp, taking in every word. As the day went on, they found themselves sharing more. Ethan told her about the oceans of Earth, about cities full of lights, about music and celebrations. Sira told him about the great storms on her homeworld, how lightning would dance across the sky for hours, and how her people once sang songs to the wind before they went into battle. The more they spoke, the more the air between them changed. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was understanding later. Sira brought out a small wooden box from the back of the shelter. Inside were a few objects, a carved stone, a strip of cloth, a small silver ring that looked human. "These are the only things I kept," she said. Ethan touched the ring. "Who was it?" "A friend," she replied, her eyes distant. "A soldier, like you." He wanted to ask more, but something in her face told him to stop. That night, the rain eased, and the forest filled with the sounds of dripping leaves and distant calls of night creatures. They sat by the fire, the light casting soft shadows on the walls. "You remind me of him," Sira said suddenly. Ethan looked up. "Your son?" She nodded, not in face but in the way you refused to stop. For a long time neither spoke. The fire burned low, and the vines above them glowed faintly in the dim light. Ethan realized that for the first time since the war began, he didn't feel completely alone. He knew she was still an alien, still someone from the other side of the conflict, but she was also the reason he was alive. And maybe, just maybe, he was becoming the reason she still had someone to protect. The morning came with an uneasy stillness. The forest outside the shelter was too quiet. No birds called, no insects hummed. Ethan noticed it first. Stepping outside to stretch, the air felt heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Sira emerged from the shadows, spear in hand. Her eyes swept over the tree line with a sharp, alert focus. "Something's wrong," she murmured. Ethan had learned to trust her instincts. Whenever she spoke like that, danger was close. They moved back inside the shelter, Sira keeping her weapon ready. Minutes passed. Then the sound came, faint at first, then growing clearer, marching, heavy, synchronized steps on the wet ground. Ethan's stomach tightened. Those were not beasts. Those were soldiers. From the mouth of the cave, he saw them appear. A squad of armored aliens, their armor black and red, marked with the crest he had seen on the battlefield. They carried rifles that glowed with faint blue light. The one in front raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. His voice was deep and commanding. "Sira of the Outlands, by order of the Council, you will hand over the human soldier." Ethan felt his body tense. So they had been looking for him. He glanced at Sira, expecting her to step aside. Instead, she moved forward, placing herself between him and the soldiers. "No," she said simply. The leader tilted his head. "This is not your fight, Sira." Her grip on the spear tightened. "It is now. You protect an enemy," the soldier growled. "Do you know what that means?" "I know," she said, her voice calm but unshakable. "And I do not care." The soldiers shifted, raising their weapons. Ethan's heart pounded. He knew what would happen next. Sira lowered her stance, ready to fight. "You should go," Ethan whispered urgently. "They'll kill you." She glanced back at him, and for a brief second, her expression softened. "You are mine to protect," she said firmly. The first shot came like a flash of lightning. Sira spun, deflecting the energy blast with the shaft of her spear. The impact burned a black mark into the wood. She lunged forward, moving faster than Ethan had ever seen. Her spear caught the lead soldier in the chest, sending him sprawling. The other soldiers opened fire, blue bolts lighting up the forest shadows. Ethan ducked behind a rock, searching desperately for anything he could use as a weapon. He found a discarded short blade near the entrance. It was alien-made but felt solid in his hand. Sira moved like a storm, each strike precise and brutal. 2 soldiers went down under her spear. Another fell when she swung the weapon sideways and shattered his helmet. But there were too many. One of them managed to fire a shot that grazed her shoulder. She didn't slow, but Ethan saw the red line of blood across her skin. Ethan didn't think. He rushed forward, slashing at the soldier closest to him. The blade cut deep into the alien's leg, making him stumble. Sira finished him with a quick thrust. "You fight good," she said breathlessly. Her eyes burned with determination. But Ethan could see the exhaustion setting in. The remaining soldiers regrouped, pulling back toward the trees. One shouted something in their language, and a flare shot into the sky. "Glowing red. They'll bring more," Ethan said. Sira nodded, her breathing heavy. "Then we leave." There was no time to gather much. Sira grabbed a pack of supplies and slung it over her shoulder. Ethan followed her into the forest, moving quickly but staying low. The sound of distant shouts and the crash of footsteps told them the soldiers were spreading out to search. Hours passed as they moved through twisting paths. Every so often, Sira would stop, listening for pursuit. Ethan's legs burned, but he didn't complain. The look on her face told him she was thinking ahead. Finally, they reached a narrow ravine where the sound of running water masked their steps. Here, they paused, hidden in the shadows. "They won't stop," Ethan said quietly. "No," Sira agreed. "But neither will I." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw no trace of the guarded distance she usually kept. There was only fierce resolve. "They will have to go through me to take you," she said. In that moment, Ethan understood something. This wasn't just about him anymore. Sira wasn't protecting the soldier from the enemy. She was protecting someone she had chosen, and she would fight anyone who tried to take that away. The ravine was dark and cold. Water trickled between jagged rocks, the sound masking their breathing. Ethan sat with his back against the stone, his muscles aching from hours of running. Sira stood nearby, her spear resting against her shoulder. Eyes scanning the shadows above. The soldiers were still out there. They would not stop until they found them. The silence was broken by a distant rumble, not thunder, but the sound of heavy transport craft moving through the sky. Searchlights swept over the forest in wide arcs. "They are tightening the net," Sira said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. "So what now?" Her gaze shifted to him, calm but unyielding. "Now we find a way past them." They moved again, staying close to the stone walls of the ravine. Ethan's boots slipped on the wet rock, but Sira steadied him with one large hand. Every step felt like it brought them closer to a final choice: fight or flee. Hours passed, the darkness of the forest pressing in. Finally, the ravine opened into a wide clearing lit by the pale glow of alien plants. On the far side, half hidden in the undergrowth, was something Ethan didn't expect: a small, weather-worn transport pod. It was old, dented, and covered in moss, but it looked like it could still fly. Sira stepped forward, brushing dirt from its surface. "I hid this years ago," she said, "for the day I might need to disappear." Ethan stepped closer, hope rising in his chest. "Then we use it." But before they could act, the night split with the sharp crack of a rifle. A bolt of blue energy slammed into the ground beside them. Sira pushed Ethan behind the pod, her spear flashing into her hands from the trees. Soldiers emerged, a fresh squad, faster and better armed. The leader's voice rang out. "It's over, Sira, step aside." She didn't move. Instead, she planted her feet, her towering frame casting a long shadow over Ethan. "You will not have him," she said. The soldiers opened fire, and the clearing erupted in chaos. Sira moved like a whirlwind, her spear striking with deadly precision. One soldier fell, then another, but more poured in from the tree line. Ethan crawled to the side of the pod, searching for an access panel. His hands shook as he tore away the vines, revealing a cracked control screen. He had no idea how to fly alien tech, but he could try. Behind him, Sira's roars echoed through the clearing as she fought, the sound of metal clashing and energy. Bolts striking the ground filled the air. A sharp cry made him turn. Sira staggered, a blast grazing her leg. Two soldiers closed in on her from opposite sides. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a fallen soldier's rifle and fired. The weapon kicked hard, but the shot hit true, dropping one of them. Sira took down the other with a brutal sweep of her spear. "Go!" she shouted. Ethan climbed into the pod, frantically tapping at the controls. Symbols lit up on the screen, alien runes he didn't understand. But then the engines coughed to life, a low hum building into a steady vibration. Sira backed toward the pod, striking down another attacker. "Get in!" Ethan yelled. She jumped into the cockpit, slamming the hatch shut as bolts of energy rattled against it. The pod lifted, slowly at first, then faster. Through the small viewport, Ethan saw the soldiers shrinking below, their weapons still firing. Into the night, Sira's hands moved across the controls with confidence. The pod angled upward, breaking through the mist into open sky. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the engines and the rush of wind were the only sounds. Finally, Ethan said, "You could have left me." "You should have." Sira's eyes stayed on the stars ahead. "I chose not to," she said simply. "Why?" he asked again, his voice quiet. She glanced at him, and for a brief moment, the hard warrior's mask slipped. "Because you remind me of what I lost, and of what I can still protect." They flew in silence after that. Below them, the forest stretched on like an endless sea, the lights of the soldiers fading into nothing. The war was still out there, and they both knew it, but for now, they had escaped, and for now, that was enough. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion finally pulling at his body. Sira sat beside him, still watchful, still ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together, because somewhere on a battlefield, under fire and smoke, an alien giant had made a choice. And that choice had changed everything.